and they've had economic stagnation up until recent times when they began to cut the cost of government, cut the size of government, and lower taxes, and found themselves creating jobs. So I'd like to recognize Mr. McCotter at this point for comments that he might have.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. We've seen throughout our lifetimes the argument put forward that the way out of a fiscal mess is to raise taxes. And we've learned one thing. If they tax it and take it, they spend it. Over and over and over again, the same siren song. Government must increase revenues. That revenues are the problem. In short, the hardworking American people are the problem because they don't pay through the nose for the federal government's overspending. Well, I think the American people understand that we have not a revenue problem, but a spending problem. So as we go forward, I think it is wise to remind many of our colleagues that if taxation is the road to prosperity, why do they not have 100% taxation? Because they know that it does not work. They know that it is a short-term expedient that has long-term damaging consequences to the economy. And as you go forward and you try to punish productivity, you produce unemployment, you produce poverty. In short, the cycle continues anew. And as productivity drops, revenues drop. And then the calls for more revenue come in because the spending never stops. Because the spending, as we saw with the stimulus and other legislation of the past Democratic majority, is that they will then spend even more money to try to get their way out of a crisis. It was disappointing to see the President buy into the logic that your prosperity comes from the government rather than from the fruits of your own hard work, and that somehow the government is entitled to whatever of your money it deems necessary to continue its wasteful spending habits. Again, this is rejected. As the gentleman from New Mexico understands, we live in a very difficult period of time. We're making the transition from an industrialized society to a globalized, consumer-driven economy. We've seen families across America and businesses across America make the difficult decisions to survive, to compete. They have not only had to discard with things that they wanted, but things at times that they felt they needed. And yet one entity above all, has failed to emulate the difficult decisions made by men and women across America. And that entity is big government. And the reason is very simple. You can only spend what you make, but big government can spend what it takes from you. And so today we saw the President again make the argument that if we just took more from the American people, or a certain segment of the American people, disregarding his rhetoric that we were all in this together, evidently that is now as passé as some of his other pronunciations. The reality remains. We have to grow our way out of this. We have to adapt to a consumer-driven economy. We have to have a citizen-driven government, one that understands that the founding principles of this country are there for a reason, that now that we have reached the height, the zenith of the industrial welfare state, that fosters dependence of individuals upon it rather than fostering and facilitating self-government and liberty and prosperity, that the day will come when this government and its fiscal recklessness proves unsustainable. And the question before us now is a very simple one. Will we responsibly and constructively address this crisis by performing our constitutional responsibilities and fulfilling the promises we made to our constituents, or we will go on with the same tired tax and spend policies that didn't work in the 70s, which in many cases were known quite simply as soak the rich, spend the bread. Bad idea. So, to the gentleman from New Mexico, I thank him for his time and point out that the fiscal debate, which will continue here tomorrow, is a very simple one. You can protect the big government policies of the past, or you can look forward to a self-government, a citizen-driven government, a consumer-driven economy that unleashes the entrepreneurial genius of Americans and the diligence of workers and allows family to move into a future of liberty and prosperity. Or in short, you can support the President and the politics of the past are bankruptcy. Or we can look forward and let the American people lead us into a new era of liberty and prosperity. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his comments, and he pointed out that we cannot sustain this course, that actually this course is doomed to fail. And I draw attention to my chart again, the far right-hand corner of the chart, in which we show here exactly what the Office of Management and Budget says. This is the President's own economic arm of the White House that says that our prosperity through time has been increasing. That's the upward sloping line. but now it's flattening out to the red zone in the chart. But then we see the chart absolutely stops at some point in time. That's about 2038. That is the point that Mr. Mercado refers to, that we are on the path to stopping our economy. Our economy will actually fail because of the policies that we have now. And this is the future that is being demonstrated by our President today in his speech. Now, as he talks about taxing, understand that we have lost jobs because of our tax policy, and we've lost jobs because of our regulatory policy. Now, in this speech today, he talks about tax policy, but it's going the wrong direction. In previous speeches, he's talked about the need to reform corporate taxes, because he acknowledges in his State of the Union speech, he acknowledged that we are taxed too high, that we can't create the economic growth that we need because we are taxing corporations in a fashion that exceeds other nations in the world. So he acknowledges it there, and I was hoping today in his speech that he would clarify, that he would begin to set a target, that he would set a timetable where we could start pulling back those manufacturing jobs because of a reform in tax policy. But curiously, in defining our future and in defining the way that we're looking at the values of the country, that's his declaration for what he wants to do in a speech today, he omits the job creation piece of taxation policy toward our corporations. He acknowledges that in his State of the Union speech. In the State of the Union speech, he says that we're taxed at too high a rate, that he wants to cure that. He says that we must have reform. He said we need to use our savings to lower the corporate tax rate for the first time in 25 years. And that was what I think Americans were looking for. Americans maybe can't express the companies that have left this nation to find lower tax rates and better economic regulations in other countries. They might not be able to name them, but they implicitly know that they exist. But I will look at, again, my chart. The revenues in this nation are $2.2 trillion. That's the accumulated taxes that we pay to our government. The expenses are $3.5. Yes, we can cut our expenses, but we should be concentrating in growing the jobs and having people go back to work. As they go back to work, they begin to pay taxes. Our $2.2 trillion begins to increase, but as every single individual is hired, they come off welfare, unemployment, and food stamps, and then they go down into the productive part of society, so we find our economic imbalance collapsing toward itself. The costs collapse as we are hiring people and putting them back to work. And that should have been the concentration of President Obama's speech today. In the past, because of our policies, we've lost the producers in this country, a list of them: Fender Guitars, Converse, Etch-a-Sketch, Radio Flyer, Levi's, Craftsman Tools, Stanley Tools, USA Flags, Rawlings Baseballs, Bronx Candy, IBM Computers, NBA Uniforms. These are just a partial list of companies that have decided that it's cheaper to manufacture somewhere else because our policies make it too difficult. If we're going to rebuild our economy, we need to rebuild that manufacturing base, and we do that through tax policy. That should be the concentration of both parties at this time in our nation's history. Now, the President also mentions on page 2 that we're amassing an alarming debt levels back in the 1980s. If I look at my chart, again, I show our deficits. This year our deficit is $1.3 trillion. That is, our spending exceeds the revenues by $1.3 trillion. That deficit runs over, and I show it going into our debt barrel, that accumulated debt for generations past. You know, Mr. Obama mentions adequately that that debt in the 80s started reaching alarming levels. But from the time of George Washington until the first President Bush, that's after 1980, we had an accumulation of about $5 trillion worth of debt. If you look at the chart, you can see that we have an accumulation today of almost $15 trillion. So we had $5 trillion back in the mid-'80s, and now we're at $15 trillion. I would point out to the President, when he says we were amassing debt at alarming levels in the 1980s, that the debt he has accumulated in his presidency is almost equivalent to what we accumulated from the time of George Washington to the first President Bush. That is alarming. It's an alarming statistic that we have a deficit today in this budget of $1.3 trillion, but in 2007, the last budget written under a Republican Congress and with President Bush as president, the last deficit was under $200 billion. That would be the equivalent to 0.2. So today we're over $1.1 trillion, and even up into when the President came into office, our annual deficit was less than $500 million. So we have now, $500 billion. We now have over $1.5 trillion that the President is suggesting our debt level should be next year. So in his time alone, we've increased deficits from the billion-dollar category, increased them to the trillion-dollar category, and that is alarming debt. That is what has got other nations pointing to us and saying that's not sustainable. They're afraid when they loan us money that it's not going to be paid back. And so nations are increasingly reticent to lend us money. That then results in the Federal Reserve buying most of our debt. This year, our Federal Reserve is on track. Now, keep in mind, they get much of their money from the government, and then they're loaning us money from the other hand. Our Federal Reserve this year is on track to lend us about 60 to 70% of the money that we borrow. Now, Mr. Bernanke expresses deep belief that there are buyers for those Treasury bills out there. There are people who are going to lend our nation money. But as they look at the economic instability that we're facing, they understand the need that we have to, number one, correct spending, but number two, to grow the economy and create jobs. Now, there are those skeptics who do not believe that tax cuts will create jobs. Again, I follow the example of Exxon. When you take their profits away, you tax them more, then you actually decrease the amount that they're spending with drilling companies, offshore platforms, that they're spending in different communities to get services done to their wells as they drill them. Also, I would remind the listeners today of Mr. Sweat, that $340,000 for the bulldozer. Those are the evidences that we get that tax cuts will create jobs. But if we want to look at the other model, tax increases killing jobs, we can look no further than our own country. At the time of the tax cuts of 2003, over the next 4 to 5 years, our economy created over 5 million jobs. As the threat of taxes loomed, as the economic slowdown came in, as the uncertainty of the current administration began to take hold, then we have lost almost 3 million jobs. And so just the talk of taxes, the talk of the cap-and-trade tax, permeated the discussions in 2009. It began to cause people to shy away and say, we better not invest because we're afraid we're going to be taxed. The discussions of the health care bill also related to the belief that people had that Washington was going to raise taxes in the health care field. And so again, consumers began not to purchase as much. Investors began not to buy new equipment. People everywhere were becoming more cautious, and we slipped into stagnation. Our economy began to stagnate and lose jobs, and has not yet been creating those jobs at any significant rate. We're still above 8% unemployment, and that was to be the floor we would find if we spent the money on the stimulus in a previous vision that the Obama administration gave to us. So as we think about other examples, I always like to use the example of Ireland. 15 or 20 years ago, Ireland began to lower its corporate tax rates. They believed, as I'm saying tonight, that if they would lower tax rates to corporations, that the companies would actually come flooding into the country. They would come there to produce. And it created the Irish miracle, the economic miracle of growth that was caused by Ireland cutting its corporate tax rate from about 36% down to around 12%. A significant decrease. Companies began to flood into Ireland. The contrast is also given by Ireland. As they began to find prosperity, they began to spend more than they bring in. This same model that we're looking at here, they began to raise taxes, and now then corporations are flooding away. Just today, I was visiting with the managers of a cheese plant that is on the east side of New Mexico. They're an Irish company. They've come here to produce because it's just too difficult, too high. The taxes are too great in Ireland. My brother-in-law works for Hughes Tool. He was at Hughes Tool back when they moved factories, production facilities into Ireland. This year, my brother-in-law went to disassemble the last plant in Ireland because they had gone up on their tax rates and no longer was it a good place to operate. So if we're interested in solving the economic chaos that we're facing, we can't get there simply by spending cuts. We can't get there by taxing the rich. In other words, taxing the rich is going to drive us further away from the goal, further into stagnation, further into job losses. If we're going to rebuild our economy, we must concentrate on economic growth. And the nice thing is that the actuarial tables tell us that if we will grow jobs at about 3.5%, that this imbalance begins to disappear, that the worry of the future begins to dissipate, simply because we grow the economy, we create jobs, we take people off of unemployment, we take people off of welfare, off of food stamps. Our 3.5 cost to the government begins to diminish, the 2.2 begins to grow, and we find ourselves reaching balance. And over the long term, we find ourselves beginning to reduce this $15 trillion debt. We find ourselves able to sustain the $202 trillion worth of unplanned expenses. Excuse me, they're not unplanned, they're simply unpaid for. The expenses of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. That's where the real threat lies. And nowhere in Mr. Obama's plan did I see a dealing with those significant drains on our economy. His only plan is to tax the rich, the millionaires and the billionaires, by making them pay their fair share, and that, he says, is going to fix the economy. That, my friends, is going to wreck the economy. When we choose that course of making the rich pay more than their fair share, they owe it to us. It's only fair, he says in his speech, that they would pay a little more. When we do that, we're going to choke jobs off even more. Other nations, our 2.2 is going to be less. We're going to put those people out of work, just like we did offshore in Louisiana. We put about 100,000 people out of work there. We put them out, or we're on the way to putting them out of work. Those people, instead of paying taxes, are going to pay no taxes, but they're now going to cost us unemployment benefits. They're going to cost us in Medicare, Medicaid. They're going to cost us in food stamps, welfare, and they're not going to be producing. So with this vision of taxing the rich, we're going to move more to an unproductive society because you cannot create more productivity by taxing it. If that were the case, Every nation would be productive. Every nation can always go up on taxes, but not every nation can create the environment to where innovators are allowed to produce. The innovations in the oil and gas industry have been dramatic, and yet that's the single area it appears that President Obama is going to kill first. That whole specter he refers to as yesterday's fuel, yesterday's energy. If it is yesterday's energy, let the President take the lead and cease using it. Use the energies of tomorrow. Stop using that energy of the past. Let him fly an airplane on something besides jet fuel, please. Give us that bold vision and courage and leadership. Let him show us the way if fossil fuels are a thing of the past. But I suspect, like you and me, that the President is going to continue to drive his limousine on petroleum-based products. He's going to continue to fly Air Force One, not on solar power, but on jet fuel. I suspect that all of Americans are going to do it. The only thing that we're going to have as an outcome is less plentiful energy, fewer jobs, a greater imbalance in our government spending, greater uncertainty for the future. And that's a shame that that's the leadership that we're getting. Because at this point in our world's history, it would be possible, if we are literally looking to recreate our economy, to draw back the manufacturing jobs of the past, to put them back to work here, to rekindle the industries that are gone, so that we do have a bright future, so that people have not just jobs, but careers to face, that they're able to plan for their future, that they're able to save for a house, save for the kids' education, that they're able truly to live the American dream. That's what has made this country great in the past. And I think that Americans at this point in time will find that leadership to the future. And with that, I yield back my time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back his time. Does the gentleman have a motion?
Yes, I would move that we adjourn for the session.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debate.